Hello friends, today I will talk about a movie named Assigned 33 AD. Friends, please watch till the end and enjoy the movie, and please subscribe and like and comment. 33 AD is the year. It is the eve of Jesus' execution. He is in the Garden of Gethsemane praying when all of a sudden, a blue flash of light appears. A group of assassins from 2022 has journeyed back in time to 33 AD with success. Their goal is to assassinate Jesus and stop his resurrection so that Christianity can be eliminated before it is born. In search of Jesus and his sleeping disciples, the assassins begin their search. Just thereafter, a sizable mob carrying swords and clubs arrives to seize Jesus and put him to death. They are abruptly cut off by the assassins, who have come to change the course of history. Everyone is shot at first sight, and only Jesus is left alive. They eventually discover him on the ground, shot multiple times. Jesus is told by a soldier that if he is the Son of God, he ought to have been able to stop the bullets. Jesus, however, responds that this moment has already arrived. The soldier then fires his weapon, killing the divine Son. Then, they place him in a bag and travel back in time using a gadget that resembles a watch. A group of competent scientists observe what has just occurred in the interim. They reason that since the past has been changed, they must act swiftly to go back in time and undo everything. Otherwise, their reality would soon change to a new one. Then they attempt to save Jesus by going back in time to 33 AD, but it is too late. Just before Jesus and his disciples were killed by the assassins, they arrived. Since the current chronology can be replaced by a new one following Jesus' death, they must rapidly return to the present before time rewrites itself. But as soon as one of them succeeds in getting back to the present, the assassin group captures him. But reality quickly begins to shift. The office complex begins to transform into a post-apocalyptic wasteland. It is obvious from this chronology that humans are extinct. The only last human on Earth is soon killed when underground animals spring up and begin to feast on him. Then, the display goes dark. After that, the scene cuts to a few months earlier, just before everything happened. One of the villains who will kill Jesus is presented to us. He is an ex-military officer by the name of Brandt. He still considers himself a devout Christian as of right now, but that is going to change. He and his wife and children are out for a drive on what appears to be a wonderful day. Brandt is actually leaving for another state since he has been offered the position of head of security for a top-secret organization. Unfortunately, the family is involved in a terrible vehicle accident along the route, killing Brandt's wife and kids. As Brandt witnesses his entire family burn in a fiery mess, he yells in horror. As a result of the incident, Brandt has changed into a man who despises both life and God. He accuses God of failing to save his family. The former militant now questions the existence of God as well. Then we meet Ram Goldstein, a young and aspirant scientist. In a physics exam, he first encounters Amy Lee, one of his classmates. From that point forward, they begin to fall in love with one another. The scene then jumps forward 3 months, introducing us to Ram's team of young scientists. Felix, Simon, and Amy are among the bright graduates working on a project involving matter transference for an unspecified international business owned by Ahmed, an elegant and well-traveled Arab billionaire. And it turns out that Brandt is Ahmed's company's security chief. The youthful researchers devote all of their time to their project on matter transference in a lab. Ram tries one of his algorithms, and the team unintentionally destroys the building. Ahmed, the boss, is forced to check on his scientists as a result and come down. They were able to move the chair that Ram used to test his matter transference method, but the rest of the crew is unaware of this. The team is promoted to Ahmed's top team as a result of this finding. They agree to build a matter-transporting device in exchange for the billionaire's generous bonus. In the meanwhile, a flashback is displayed in which we discover that Ahmed's parents once belonged to an extreme organization. But they were compelled to become Christians as a result of specific circumstances. They were killed by the extremist organization on account of violating their own beliefs as a result of this transformation. Since then, Ahmed, who is still a supporter of the extremist group, has blamed Christianity and Jesus Christ for his parents' demise. In order to disprove Jesus' claim to be the Messiah and ultimately destroy Christianity, he intends to get his scientists to build a time machine that will allow him to travel back in time to 33 AD and kill the man. He thinks that because time travel exists, he can kill Christ before his crucifixion and resurrection in order to make up for the sins of the world. He holds that his deity is the only real God. Ram and Amy are being continuously observed by Ahmed's men while they work tirelessly in the meantime. They choose to take a little break and enter the server room, which is not being watched, covertly. A strange static noise interrupts the couple as they make out. Ram discovers that Ahmed is covertly collaborating with a general terrorist organization when he looks on one of the servers. He also discovers that the terrorist their boss works for is determined to start World War III using explosives and other weapons that are transported from one location to another. Despite knowing this, he is compelled to carry out the assignment. And after a few attempts and failures, Ram ultimately transfers matter and unintentionally builds the world's first machine. Ram not only discovered the secret to matter transfer, but he also found the secret to time travel, as seen by Ahmed's men through surveillance. Ram tries to erase all the files, nevertheless, before they reach the wrong hands because he is aware that Ahmed is up to something nasty. Soon enough, Ram is captured by Ahmed and his men as they break inside the lab. The clever billionaire then announces his plans to send a team, led by the now disillusioned Brandt, back to Jerusalem where they will kill Jesus Christ and his disciples in order to prevent Christianity from ever taking root. The issue is that Ram refused to give him the password to the computer that has the time travel formula. Therefore, Ahmed orders his men to torture him before putting him in a bag and imprisoning him in a warehouse. After some time, the thugs begin to physically assault Ram and demand that he divulge the time machine's code. The situation is made worse when Ahmed shows up and kidnaps Ram's parents. Even still, the young scientist continues to refuse to provide the secret, leading the fanatics to murder his parents. Ram doesn't answer the phone, and Amy and the others are concerned that he might be in trouble. Ahmed, the group's boss, approaches them at that very moment and informs them that they have been released from their employment agreement and are no longer required to work, albeit they will still receive the promised compensation. The only catch is that they are currently unable to communicate with anyone outside of their workplace. Ahmed tells a fib when Amy inquires about Ram, saying that he is in good hands and is working on a major US military project. The young scientist finally caves and agrees to construct the time machine after Ahmed threatens to torture Amy and all of his friends back in the lab. Ahmed asks one of his men to test it after it is finished. The time machine functions as planned, teleporting the man from one location to another. Ahmed employs Brandt and his right-hand man Sabayer to assemble his assault team and travel back in time to complete the final true objective of assassinating Jesus and his followers before his resurrection by capitalizing on Brandt's hate of God. Unexpectedly, Brandt is entirely on board with this crazy plan and immediately gathers a group of killers to board the time machine. Ram is rope-tied in the warehouse when Amy and the others break into a monitoring room and manage to find him. They save him and find out Ahmed's strategy. On the other hand, Brandt and his crew arrived in the past in the allotted time, 33 AD, and immediately began looking for Jesus. Brandt mercilessly kills all of Christ's disciples before shooting him in the head. Jesus is subsequently placed in a bag by his men, and they leave the past behind. Ram and his brilliant team are watching what just happened on the CCTV in the meantime. Ram begins to explain that because the past has been changed, their reality will soon change to a different one. Nevertheless, depending on how far back in time it has been changed, it can take some time. It can take a few moments or even hours. When the team hears this, they quickly go back in time to try to stop Brandt, but it's too late. Just before Jesus and his disciples were killed by the assassins, they arrived. The existing chronology will be replaced with a new one created since Jesus' death, thus they must return to it before time rewrites itself. In case they are murdered, Simon and Felix will be their last line of defense against Ahmed's irrational quest. Ram and Amy decide to go first. The next image shows Ram and Amy arriving an hour early, that is, immediately before the murder of Ram's parents. This implies that Brandt and his assassins are still there in this timeline along with the second iterations of the scientists. Unfortunately, Ahmed's men quickly see them and start pursuing them. The two lock themselves inside a lab, where they are ultimately surrounded. Amy is able to alert her other self from the present timeline thanks to the CCTV camera. She communicates through sign language that Ram is in the warehouse and that Ahmed's men return to kill Jesus. The two are killed shortly after. Felix and Simon are still alive in 33 AD. They decide to go back after waiting for the now dead Ram and Amy. Felix successfully uses his time retriever to get to the present, but Simon's retriever breaks and he gets stuck in that timeline. Sadly, Ahmed and his men are already waiting in the time machine when Felix returns to the present. By killing Jesus, Ahmed has now succeeded in eradicating Christianity, but their reality soon devolves into a post-apocalyptic wasteland. This is so that he might live a life without forgiveness. This iteration of Felix deteriorates gradually in the desert. Simon is the only original scientist left, since the others have all passed away. While Ram is being rescued from the warehouse, the second iteration of the scientists are watching the CCTV tape. They then travel back in time even further in the lab, resulting in time loops within of time loops. Just 10 minutes before Brandt and his men arrive at 33 AD, they travel back in time. Felix and Simon are both killed in an ensuing gunfight. From their squad, only Ram and Amy survive, while Brandt and Sabayer manage to flee. Amy is however seriously hurt in the fight. She wants Ram to pursue Brandt and Sabayer in order to prevent them from killing Jesus because she is a fervent Christian. Ram resists leaving her alone, but he does so after she begs him to. Then, in order to stop the bleeding, he strips off his clothes and ties them around Amy. After some time, Ram discovers Sabayer and pursues him. The original Simon is still alive in this universe, having become trapped there after his retriever, it seems, fried. Surprisingly, he encounters Jesus and responds with all the thrill and surprise of seeing the Son of God up close. Because he has seen the film The Passion of the Christ, Simon tries to persuade Jesus to forego the resurrection. Jesus, however, is adamant about carrying it through and explains that it is the only course of action available to him. Jesus is soon taken captive by the sizable mob to be crucified. Later, Ram runs across Jesus and his kidnappers. However, a Roman centurion tries to attack him when he tries to strike up a discussion. Fortunately, he escapes and returns to Amy, who is dying. And to everyone's dismay, he discovers that Ahmed's men had deactivated his and Amy's time retrievers in the past. They are unable to return home as a result of this. The next morning, Brandt and Sabayer search the village for Jesus while posing as locals. But when Sabayer grabs a tomato from a nearby cellar and consumes it without paying a dime, everything goes sideways. The local guards are called to make the arrests because it transpires that this is a serious felony in this 33 AD timeframe. Sabayer, though, puts up a fight and kills a guard. Chaos ensues, but eventually the guards are able to outnumber the two and carry the two to their execution by crucifixion. Sabayer loses his time retriever during the battle and is later picked up by a woman. Jesus is likewise taken for the crucifixion in the scenario that follows. He is whipped by the guard and made to carry his own cross. When Simon notices this, he begs Jesus to leave, but the Son of God is serious about carrying out his mission to save humanity. Simon then assists Jesus in picking up the cross and standing. Ram shows up shortly after the treatment is over with a dying Amy, who requests to see her God in person. If the crucified Jesus is the God he claims to be, he should be able to save his lover, the man begs. Christ asserts that Amy can only be saved by pardoning Brandt though. Additionally, we discover that Saber and Brant, the latter of whom begs Jesus' pardon, were the criminals crucified with Jesus. Ram is meanwhile vainly searching the hamlet for assistance after learning that Jesus won't perform any miracles to save his lover. Finally, he runs upon Simon, whom he informs of their predicament. While Brant and Saber are separated, Ahmed makes the decision to go back in time and finds the tomb of the recently crucified Jesus. He thinks that Jesus' followers will steal his body shortly in order to make it appear as though God has been raised from the dead. He therefore intends to ambush them to stop them from snatching the body and ultimately stop the spread of Christianity. In a fit of terror, he triggers his time travel apparatus, which causes him and Jesus' body to vanish from the tomb as a result of an abruptly strong earthquake. However, a dying man Amy misinterprets the shaking as the resurrection of her God. Ram and Simon check the tomb, but they do not discover Jesus' body. They conclude that Ahmed is to blame after noticing all the glow sticks laying around. Two of Jesus' disciples arrive at that precise moment to look for his body and discover that it has vanished. Ram and Simon, however, assert that Jesus has been raised from the dead before they can tell anybody else about it. The two disciples immediately believe the lads after mistaking them for angels. As a result, everything in the text occurs exactly as it does and not how we would anticipate it to. When they come back, they discover that Amy has passed away. This implies that Amy in this particular timeline has also passed away. The same woman who earlier picked up Saber's time retriever approaches Ram and Simon as they are lamenting the loss of their colleague. As a result, the two resolve to travel back to the period of time right before Ram's parents were killed. All of the characters are still alive in that timeline. Simon is shot when they return home because Ahmed's men were waiting for them. In spite of this, the youngsters succeed in killing every man. Ram then instructs Simon to run the default program, which will end all time loops aside from the initial one, and to wipe the hard disk as soon as it is finished. Then he leaves to save his folks. Simon had already deleted the hard drive and run the default software when Ahmed from the earlier timeframe arrived and killed him after Ram had left. Ram simultaneously rescues his parents and pursues Ahmed from this timeline. He encounters Brant at the billionaire's office and comes dangerously close to shooting him for killing Amy in the prior timeline. But he finally understands that this is not the Brant who actually committed the crime. Ram ultimately learns the value of forgiving others and turns away from wanting to avenge this particular Brant. At that very moment, Saber and other men show up on the scene carrying Amy prisoner. He threatens to kill Amy unless Ram provides him with the code to turn on the time machine. Ram explains that he has forgiven Brant and encourages him to play the hero rather than releasing the code. Fortunately, Brant hasn't yet developed into a villain in this version of the timeline, so he recognizes Ahmed as the terrible man who is working with the radicals right away. He then kills the majority of Ahmed's soldiers before being killed by the boss. Ram ultimately kills Ahmed by stabbing him in the back when he is slightly distracted. Just then, a number of FBI agents show up on the scene and take Ahmed's remaining guys into custody. Because Simon had started the default program just before he passed away, all of the time loops began to merge into one, causing various characters to disappear into thin air. Ram from the earlier time frame likewise disappears as a result, while Ram from the earlier timeline is released from the warehouse where he had been imprisoned. In this timeline, every scientist makes it out alive. 3 months later, the scientists decide to prevent the catastrophic vehicle accident that will claim Brant's family's lives. Ram gets ready to time travel with a "Stop Road" sign in the hopes that it will be able to save the family. He is able to prevent Brant and his family from dying prematurely thanks to the plan's success. As the film comes to a close, Brant stands in awe and wonders if God prevented their deaths. Friends, thanks for the watching. Please subscribe and like and comment.